Here we are for another chapter review. Today we're reviewing chapter 10 of Journey of the Adopted Self by Betty Jean Lifton. This chapter is called The Call to Self, which is pretty self-explanatory, I think.
Deep.
Deep, but it's all about searching for who you are as an
Yeah.
adoptee.
And it starts part 2 of the book. I
And
noticed
it's,
that.
yeah, part 2 of the book. It says, the word home is virtually impossible to translate into other tongues. It's not a concept, not a place, but a state of mind where self-definition starts. It is origins. We can see the search for home as a universal quest, but for the adopted person, it is also a literal one. It's interesting because I have said over often, I never and I would sometimes attribute it to, oh, well, because my birth mother's water broke on the plane, has always been my anecdote.
Yeah.
No place ever felt really home, really until I landed in New York City.
Yeah. And also I thought of you in this because of, I think when you started having your home with Becker, then it was home.
Yes.
And I have a lot of that drawn to the feeling of home too, just recently being in my hometown thinking, is this home? Like, am I home here? Where is home? Floating home, with Jack gone. And
yes. And I went to visit Becker and stay with him and his love this weekend. And I felt home there. I was like, oh, wherever Becker is where I feel home. When he's here, I feel home. And that's really that's the only time I do, weirdly.
That makes me just tear up. I was warm, just saying that. She starts off at the beginning too, saying, I like this quote that goes on to from your quote a little bit. There's a person, Jean Emery, who was a Holocaust survivor, that said, in order to have, one must have a home in order not to need a home. And if we believe, as Amory did, that exile is lost of biological and psychological identity, then adoptees have been in exile since their separation from their mother.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that she just pulls in this, these people and ties things together where it hits me. I have to reread it several times. It's like a punch, I guess.
Yes. And then when she gets into the fear of knowing, I highlighted this: from the moment they are separated from their birth mothers, all adoptees are consciously or unconsciously in search of someplace perched somewhere between conception and birth that could be called home.
Yeah.
The adoptee may have run away as a child and acted out.
Yeah, I
circled a recurring theme.
And then here, I put this for me: good girls don't search.
Right. I thought of you with that.
Me too, because I literally felt like I didn't even think about searching. I thought about it a few times, but then, I'm like, no, can't do that because it would upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's about everybody else. And then when Jack was born, I thought, oh, I'd like to search, but then you get busy with a newborn. So I'm kind of lucky my biological family found me, because I'd probably still be doing the same thing. Maybe not. Maybe I'd listen to your podcast and then I don't know where I'd be. It's interesting.
But which I just lost my train of thought that I was going to say something about that. Oh, she talked about kind of the disconnect of feelings, right? Like you tell yourself all the different reasons. Oh, adoptees, I have medical history. I want to see if there's someone I look like, but it's really not deeply connected, and it takes that sort of great awakening, right? I talked about it for years before, again, just like that, and not having any real feelings attached to it. And then when Becker was born, it was like, all right, I'm gonna do the search.
Me too, actually. It was all about, well, I'd like to know what I look like, or medical, or I wonder what part of the world I'm from, or there's something I should know. But it's all very super. And I'm kind of going through that now, as you know. I've been searching a little bit on the biological dad side, and I'm still a little bit guarded. Like, I don't want to get hurt. So I'm just looking for this. I had a lot of thoughts going into reading this thing. I was like, whoa, everything sort of connects when you open up Betty Jean Lifton.
Yes.
I almost put it off until right before we get together, because, it's heavy stuff.
It is heavy stuff. And a lot of this, I feel like, especially since starting the podcast, I've Well, we'll come to it. I circled some of the stuff where I felt,
Yeah. There's one thing she says in here about when you first cross the threshold. I may not be like addressing it correctly because I underlined so many things, but that it's almost a hero's journey.
right. Yeah. Here.
The courage, right? I mean, it's really, there was somebody in here, Glenn, I think was an adoptee, who said we give all this credit to sports figures and all these fake, things that we idolize in the United States and different places. But really the courage to like find your roots and to go against your own internal system, like making your adoptee parents upset or
Right. The
upsetting
threatening of,
friends.
it goes into all that about the threats of, well, the peril.
Yes.
What that is. The journey is towards self is draining, overwhelming, and lonely, and fraught with perils. And then she lists all the perils. Adoptees
that.
I did too. Adoptees are in peril by losing their fantasies of the birth mother. Adoptees are in peril because they could lose their own magical self that was fused with the birth mother. They're in peril because they could break down the walls of the adoptive family system. Adoptees are in peril because they could lose their adoptive parents who were their only protectors and providers.
That was my fear.
Honestly.
Yeah. And also the adoptees face this risk. They're trapped as they are by the taboos and guilt and divided loyalties that destiny under the mandate of the closed adoption system has inflicted on them. The journey towards self is draining, like you said, overwhelming and lonely. Gosh.
And then the final peril, adoptees are in peril because the search uncovers their psychic split beneath which lies the threat of fragmentation and disintegration, which they have spent a lifetime trying to ward off. I mean, I think we have some people in common that are, way deep in there are these feelings, and it's very dangerous for some people.
It's dangerous. And it's, I feel, on adoptee Twitter, we've sort of learned that so many people have different times they're searching or how they're searching or what they're comfortable searching. But that one quote still sticks out from Rebecca Autumn's documentary on Nancy Jean Lifton on the primal wound, about that psychologist said all adoptees are searching, even as little babies and kids. The minute you know you're adopted and you look around the playground, could that be my mother? Could that be my mother? It's in your psyche. So you may never cross from that, but you're still searching. And you're always wondering, but it bubbling it to the surface. Not everybody can do that. I
mean, how could you not wonder?
How could you not wonder?
How could you not wonder?
It's just the normal curiosity. No, there was something someone said too at the very beginning. I skipped that part about where if you have your core of who you are.
Well, and then it goes into the Pinocchio syndrome, which I really identify with that a lot. A wooden puppet who, came to life only to be flooded with emotions he didn't know how to handle because he'd never been able to feel before. I definitely feel that I lived a shut down kind of avoidant attachment lifestyle.
Protecting your heart.
And then it says, and I'll touch on this in a second. This loneliness, the hole inside that cannot be filled, connects them to the baby falling through a dark universe after separation from the mother, as well as to the forbidden potential true self that now begins stirring. That hole, I joked recently with Brenda, my stepsister, like, well, now that I've quit drinking, I have to fill that hole with something. So I've chosen sugar, but it's a joke, but it's real.
It's real. Yeah. Because you are sort of, we all do it, this avoidance and patching this hole, and the sand keeps going through it, sort of like the bucket without a bottom type of thing. Yeah. It's heavy for sure. The loneliness part, she also attributed that Argentinian psychiatrist or psychologist years ago really did a study that, wasn't it, that they thought that, that babies really were traumatized, not just from the primal wound, but knew who their birth mother was. And when they put people back together through trauma and then back with their families, they, people who were not doing well in society all of a sudden did well again.
Yes.
And then Americans kind of copied that and found the same results. And that who the baby not just is traumatized, but who that person is that makes you feel
sure.
home.
I mean, you live with that sharing, it's your lifeblood for
it's the voice
9 months, and the voice and the smell and, everything, I would think.
There was a woman in there who gave up, or who her friend, she was adopted. She went with her friend to the nursery to find with her to see her baby. Do you remember?
Yes.
And she was looking through all the babies in the nursery and said, "Oh, that's my baby." And walked right over, knew exactly who her baby was without even just right away. And she thought, I'm going to love. That's when she decided.
Yeah, that stirred her, because this chapter talks about, what that moment of awakening is. Like it takes that moment of awakening to.
There is a moment for a lot of people. It's just a cut and dry. I mean, I remember when Jack was born, and he'd cry and cry with everybody, and they put him in my arms and he'd just be quiet and look at me. And I remember thinking, just the deep thoughts of birth and childbirth that everyone has a baby goes through, but then the adoptee component gets in there pretty deep.
Yes. Well, then a lot of this is, anecdotes from other adoptees. I think we've covered most of the bones of the chapter, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, the anecdotes are great. If anybody,
they really are. I mean, we're hoping that people will pick up this book.
Yeah. And go along with it.
And go in depth. We kind of just touch on it, but it's a really, really,
like, I want to tell everybody's story in it. Like,
I know.
I mean, it's big stuff, but I love our time together. And our next guest has a lot kind of that goes along with this.
Yes.
It really ties in.
And, people come to their search when they come to their search, as you will find out in this episode with our guest.
I can't wait. I'll see you in a few.
See you in a few.